reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Supernatural, metaphysical, paranormal. You know, all those things you've been wondering about? Are you ready to go deeper into the realms of the unknown? I hope you've got your walking shoes on, because life is an adventure, and this is the journey. Come on, let's go. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. This is the Journey Radio Show. And hey, I'm Jen Cruz, your host tonight. We're showing up as the She-Squatchers. So I've got my trusty teammates. I got Tammy Trickle. Hey, Tammy.
Hi, everybody.
And Jenna is somewhere out there. She's going to be hopefully popping in and out. She's having technical difficulties. So Jenna's here, kind of. Hopefully she'll be popping in. So we'll expect her later. And tonight we have a really awesome guest. His name is Larry Beans Baxter. We'll call him Beans because that's what he wants to be called. I just got to say he's got a lot of information about how his background, but I do want to say he's the author of Abandoned, that chronicles a small town in Alaska that was abandoned due to possible terrorizing Bigfoot activity, and I want to hear all about that. So let's welcome Larry Beans Baxter. Hey, are you there?
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited you could join us tonight, and we're sad that Stephen Major couldn't make it, but we're just thankful you were able to come in tonight.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it. I'm really glad to be here.
Yes. So, I mean,
Hi, Jenna.
oh, there's Jenna.
Hello, I finally made it all.
Hey.
Hello there, mister. How are you?
Living the dream.
Whoop, whoop. So am I, baby.
So let me introduce you, Jenna. This is our guest tonight. His name is Larry Beans Baxter. He likes to be called Beans. So
I heard you call him Beans while I was on there. That's why I said you, mister, because I didn't know what to call you because Jen called you Beans. So I was afraid to call you the wrong name.
Hey, you.
Hey, you, mister. You.
So we just got to get this out of the way. Why is your nickname Beans? You have to tell us.
All right. It's not a very exciting story. Back when I was in grade school, it was around the time the Fox network first came out, and they had that first lineup of shows. I think they had like Married with Children, Werewolf, and they had this little show in there that nobody remembers called Beans Baxter. And it was about a kid, like a teenager, that was a spy, and his dad got his dad was a spy, and his dad got kidnapped, and he got recruited by the agency his dad worked for. And my last name is Baxter, and his last name was Baxter, so they started calling me Beans at school. And my dad's name was Larry, and my name is Larry, and it just kind of became a way to, differentiate which Larry you want. Do you want Larry, or do you want, yep, that's it, or do you want Beans? So it just kind of went from there, and it just stuck. And I don't mind it. I like it. It's I think it's unique, and it's just it's a good way. People will remember a dude named Beans. It's not easy to forget that. So it's just kind of stuck, and I'm cool with it.
Well, that is a good story either way. It is hard when you have a junior, two people by the same name in the same house. It's hard to differentiate between which one you're talking to or about.
Yeah.
So
about the time I graduated high school, I met a friend, and he's like, I'm not calling you Beans, all right? You're a grown man. I'm not calling you that. And he calls my house one day, and he's like, hey, is Larry there? And my mom's like, do you mean Beans? And he's called me Beans ever since. He's like, okay, if his mom calls him Beans, I'll call him Beans.
Oh, honestly. Well, good
That's
to know
awesome.
Beans. Actually, I like, have you ever seen Mr. Bean? Oh,
Oh, yeah.
That's so
Love
funny.
Rowan Atkinson.
Right?
Awesome. Well, I want to hear more about Bigfoot. So let's get into Beans and Bigfoot.
I bet Bigfoot would eat beans if they had the chance. Probably the canned type and me as well.
That's funny. I just got it. It took me a minute. Sorry.
I was gonna say my favorite are Bush's honey baked beans.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. I should have brought like a roll that beautiful bean footage, and we could have showed a clip of me just sitting there.
That would have been.
Yeah.
That's
Look,
awesome.
you're so funny. You're like a comedian. Keep going. No.
It's years of police work has made me cynical, and people take that as humor. So
Hey, that's awesome.
yeah.
Dry humor is good humor.
So yeah, let's get into Bigfoot. You know, like everybody my age that's into Bigfoot, you know, the same story, Legend of Boggy Creek, and In Search of, $6 Million Man, all that. And I just really got into it, you know, at an early age. And I grew up in Kentucky, and not a lot of Bigfoot action going on there then. Now it's kind of a hot spot, but of course, now that I've moved away, it's like Bigfoot Mecca now. But when I was living there, it wasn't. And joined the military when I got, I think it was 2021. Spent 4 years in the military. Got sent up here. I used to say, I don't care where the military sends me as long as it's nowhere cold. And straight to Alaska I went. And met my wife up here. She was born and raised up here. I got out of the military, went back home for a little while. Wasn't really feeling it, and we moved back to Alaska because we both really enjoyed it so much. So we've been here ever since. Got into law enforcement. I started my law enforcement career on St. Paul Island, which is, if you watch The Deadliest Catch, you can see it there sometime. And spent a few years out there, and then got hired by the city of Homer, and worked here as a police officer for the last 12 years. And I just recently retired in January. When I retired, I was the investigation sergeant, which meant I handled all the felony cases or serious cases, you know, sexual assaults, murders, suicide, stuff like that. I either investigated it or I supervised the investigation of it. So that's kind of the last few years of my life there. And then once I got out, I really decided I wanted to spend more time looking for Bigfoot and devote more time to that. And it seems like in Alaska, especially down here on the Kenai Peninsula where I live, you don't hear a lot of, it doesn't seem very squatchy. If you Google Kenai Peninsula Bigfoot, there's not a whole lot that comes up. And I really just kind of dug around and started looking into it. And I found out there's a lot more here than people realize as far as Bigfoot goes. And Port Chatham is one of those. Port Chatham is actually on the Kenai Peninsula. It's only about 40 miles from where I'm sitting here talking to you right now. Unfortunately, it's really hard for me to get to. It's you got to get there by boat. You can't really fly into there, or you can't drive there. So it's very expensive to get to. You got to have a big boat because it's around the corner, which is what we call basically when you come out of Kachemak Bay, you got to go around the corner into the real ocean. So it gets pretty rough there. So it's you got to have a 30-foot boat or bigger, and those can be pretty expensive to rent. And I've thought about buying one, but every time I decide to buy a boat, I'm like, I'm just going to go down to the harbor and just throw my money in the water because it would probably be better. But yeah, you know, she's laughing. She's somebody's got a boat.
Yes, I got you.
Super
yeah.
expensive. Just the fuel itself is super expensive. It's
I
ridiculous.
know.
Well, think about how expensive they're going to be now that wood has gone up so much.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, I've seen some used ones that I'm like, man, that would be a great squatching boat. And it's just, well, I can have a house or I can have a boat, but I can't have both. So
Houseboat.
There you go.
not in Alaska.
Well, boats are still made with wood, aren't they? I don't know.
You can get metal ones up here.
Oh.
There's actually, what is it called? Baywell Boat Company makes some amazing metal boats. I mean, they're phenomenal, but they're also about $300,000.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah.
yeah. Funny.
So that would be if I had a dream squatching boat, it would be a Baywell boat, you know, with a large cabin, and then I just put cameras all around that thing, thermal cameras and spotlights and floodlights, and just have my little command center in the wheelhouse there where I could monitor everything and just skirt around the coast. But
would you live in it? I mean, would you just sell everything and just go live on a boat? Look for Bigfoot for the rest of your life?
Probably not.
Oh.
I'm a landlubber. Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in Kentucky, which is a landlocked state, and we had a lot of water moccasins and stuff there, so I'm not too keen on water or swimming or anything like that.
Oh no. Well, I want to hear more about you and Bigfoot.
So I got into the Port Chatham thing, and I really started looking into it.
Mhm.
Like I said, it's not very far from here at all. And are you guys familiar with Adam Davies at all? You know who he is?
Yes.
Yeah. So I met Adam at the International Bigfoot Conference. I think it was in 2017. And he told me one day, he's like, "Hey, I'm coming up to Alaska." And I said, "Oh man, well if you're in Homer, look me up. I'll buy you a beer." And he's like, "Well, we're coming right through Homer. We're going to Port Chatham." So I was like, "Great," So and that's how I met Stephen and Adam. They were coming up here to go to Port Chatham to scout for Stephen's documentary that he was going to make. So we hung out for, I don't know, hours one night, just sitting around the bar talking Bigfoot, and it was a great time. And Stephen contacted me later and said, "Hey, I'm going into Port Chatham to make this documentary. Would you like to go with me?" And I was like, "Absolutely, I would." Because I live nearby, and I was a local, and he wanted to have me on the team. And plus, he knew my law enforcement background, and he wanted me to come along and help out with security. And I had weapons and stuff. I had guns that I could bring, and it would be easier than him getting them up here from the lower 48. So I tagged along, and we made the documentary in 2018. And that was an amazing experience. That was the first on the ground Bigfoot research that was done in the Port Chatham. We were the first ones that went in there with the express purpose of looking for Bigfoot and documenting it. So I know there had been previous claims to have gone in there, but we were actually the first ones that went in there. And mostly it was due to the remote location. It's hard to get in there. Other people have tried to get in there and haven't been able to make it work. But Stephen, he's very resourceful, and he was able to pull it off. Got us a really nice boat to take us down there and stay in Port Chatham while we were on the ground there, and we could go back to the boat and sleep at night. That way, we didn't have enough people on the team really to stay on the ground, because if we had stayed overnight in Port Chatham, we would have wanted to have like a 24-hour guard around the camp and all that, and there just wasn't enough of us to do that. So that, and it's Alaska. I was the only one from Alaska on the trip, and nobody else was like acclimated to the Alaskan weather, so they would have all been freezing, and I would have been sitting there in my t-shirt like, "Come on, it's like 40 degrees."
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, that's like a Minnesotan, true to heart right here.
Yeah. Oh, it's snowing right now. Like right now, it's snowing
Yeah,
right
it
here.
snowed today too.
Mm-hmm.
So we did the documentary in 2018, and we had a lot of creepy things happen during the documentary. One of the team members actually saw some tree peeking, saw something, peeking behind a tree and moving back. And Stephen actually saw something dark between two trees. He said it was big and white and looked like it had like a mohawk, like a strip of fur going down its back. And about the same, near the same place where Stephen had that sighting, I got some thermal footage of something that I caught. It looked like Donkey Kong. If you guys are familiar with the video game character, yeah, it looked like Donkey Kong doing this. He was waving his arms up and down, and I had the FLIR, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, "What is that?" So I like hand the FLIR off to somebody else. I'm like, "Hey, do you look over there? Do you see that?" And I gave it to the brother of the camera guy, and he goes, "It looks like a dude." And so then he hands me it back, and I'm like, "Well, maybe I should record this," because I hadn't hit record yet. And we start moving towards it. I hit record, and it starts like fading into the background of the trees. And I got a little bit of footage, but it doesn't look as good as what I initially saw. But you can definitely tell it's kind of bipedal, and it like takes a step behind a tree, and then it's gone. But yeah, that was probably the craziest thing that happened to me on that trip. And we got done with the documentary, and it came out. It's available on Amazon. It's called In Search of the Port Chatham Hairy Man. And not too long after that came out, we were approached by the Travel Channel, who was wanting to go in there, and they were doing their Alaska Triangle series. And they wanted to go in there back to Port Chatham with us. And so we agreed. And that trip, Adam got to come with us. So it was me, Adam, and Steven, and we all went in there. And that trip was a little less uneventful. I think that might have been partly because of the size of our crew, basically like tripled. We had the production team with us. There was like 4 or 5 of them, and it was me, Adam, and Josiah, our camera guy that tags along with us. And so it seemed like things definitely kind of the activity kind of de-escalated a little bit. And I'm not sure if it was because of the size of our crew, or maybe just because it was a different time of year. Because we went in there, it was around May, and when we went in the last time, it was September. But definitely didn't seem to have as much activity. We didn't hear as much. There were several times when we were there filming the documentary, we'd walk into an area, and just as we'd walk into an area, we hear thump, 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 thump. As something was like, it just was just out of sight, just ahead of us. And it seemed like it was just not following us. Basically, it was preceding us wherever we were going. And Stephen believed it was probably keeping an eye on us while we were there. And we come across a really interesting area where there was just these just full blueberry bushes. I mean, just berries. I mean, you could just reach down and just pick them and eat them off the plant there. And we noticed how there was just this area full of full berries and just untouched. And then we kind of entered this area where all the berries had been eaten, and there was bear scat everywhere. And it was just like we went through this invisible line, almost like we went into somebody else's territory where, oh, okay, the bears have eaten all these berries. The bears, are all over the place. There's bear scat, there's bear tracks, there's bear. And then we just go through this invisible line, and there's berries everywhere, and no bear scat and no bear sign. And it was kind of we're like, well, have the bears just not got over here to eat, or is this some kind of territory that's keeping them out? And personally, I think that bears and Bigfoot, they tend to avoid each other as much as possible. There's a sighting in J. Robert Alley's book, Raincoast Sasquatch, which is mostly about Bigfoot in Alaska. And he talks about in there's some guys that have a sighting from a boat, and they see a bear come out on the shoreline. He's walking around. He kind of lifts his head, sniffs the air, turns around and goes right back the other direction. And then they see from stage left over here, they see a Bigfoot walking down the beach. The Bigfoot stops, lifts his head, smells, and turns around and goes back the way he was coming. So that's always really stuck in my mind. It's just that one sighting. So, it's there's a lot of speculation that goes into it. But, everything with Bigfoot is pretty much speculation until we get conclusive proof. But I've always had that in my mind when I think about bears and Bigfoot. I just don't think they intermingle that much with territory. And that really stuck in my head over in Port Chatham when we were walking through there, and we had that area that had been ravaged by bears. And then, walk, a half mile down, and then all of a sudden it's just berries as far as you can see, no bear sign, no bear, tracks, nothing. And I always thought that when we crossed that line, maybe we had walked into the Bigfoot's territory.
Quick question for you. These berries, were they the exact same berry bushes? Do you know? Because I'm thinking if one was maybe poisonous, they wouldn't have touched it. I know animals know about.
No, it was all blueberries.
Oh, it was literally all blueberries. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just this huge, just as far as the eye could see of blueberries.
Did you taste some?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, the first day we went out, we would just grab a couple and pop them in our mouths. But the second day we went back out, Mary Beth actually brought like a gallon-sized Ziploc bag, and she got a bunch of them. And I don't know what she made with them, but yeah, we collected a bunch of them.
Oh, yummy, yummy. Oh, fresh. Awesome. So when was that sighting again?
That would have been the 2018 trip that we went on.
Great.
Awesome. So that's when you really got into it then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That lit the fire right there. That was just I couldn't explain that thermal footage I got, and I got to find out what it is. I gotta get one. I want to see one, unobstructed and face to face.
I think that's what we all want. It's just the experience, the ability to maybe share our love from person to being to being.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes, like, well, if I see one, what's going to happen? Am I just going to be like, okay, they're real. I can go do something else now. Or am I going to be like, okay, now I've seen one. What is it? Now I've got to find out. So
Yeah.
I wonder how that's going to go.
I
If it
think
ever
it's a
happens.
never ending to be continued. The more answers you get, the more questions you have.
Yeah, every time that we
True.
find evidence, we're like, oh, now we want to know this and we don't want to know that. So I don't think we'll ever be done.
Yeah. Well, I've definitely got to a point over the years where I kind of like, I'm not going to really mess with this anymore. I'm kind of maybe going to step back from it. And then something will happen. It's like a carrot, on the stick. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to go look at, I'm going to go find out more about this, or I'm going to go to that place. And it seems like every time I think about hanging it up, something happens to draw me back in.
Yep, I can totally relate. I can totally relate 'cause it's always you want to know more. Something happens, you want to know more. So you wrote this book about the happenings up in Alaska.
Yeah. I just realized I've been talking about Port Chatham for like 20 minutes and I haven't explained what Port Chatham is. Um, so Port Chatham, it's a little town that was on the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. And it was founded in the early 1900s. And it was named, the Port Chatham was named for one of, the Vancouver, the guy that came through the Northwest and, was exploring. Well, Port Chatham was named after one of his ships that was in his fleet. And the town of Portlock was named after Nathaniel Portlock, who was a British Navy captain. And Portlock was the town that was located in Port Chatham. And you hear people talk about, well, there was two towns. There was Port Chatham and Port Locke. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Port Chatham is the name of the bay, and Port Locke's the name of the town. And they're pretty much used interchangeably. I've found some legal documents from Port Locke from the town, and I've got a bill of sale for the pool hall that was there, and they just use the names Port Locke and Port Chatham just interchangeably. So there wasn't two towns. It's just that general area. But anyway, the town was founded in the early 1900s. They had a lot of industry there. They had a fish processing plant. They had a big sawmill. They had some mink farms and a school, store. I mean, just everything that every little, Alaska town has. And then you had a little bit more because you had the infrastructure there, the cannery and all that. So they had, the workers' quarters. They had to feed and house and clothe all those people. So it was a pretty bustling little town for Alaska standards. And in the early, I think it was I can't remember if it was 1902 or 1905. There was some rumblings amongst the workers. Most of the workers were local Aleut natives. And they basically went to the boss and they said, hey, we don't feel safe working anymore. We're going to quit because of the Nantinaq that's in the woods. He won't leave us alone. And Nantinaq is their name for Bigfoot, the big hairy man, big hairy thing. So the foreman, the boss is like, well, we can't, you guys can't just quit, we need you. And they kind of come to an agreement. They hired some security guards or some like it wasn't Pinkertons, but like Pinkertons, to basically protect the town, to form a perimeter around the town and guard the town while the guys were at work. And that was really the first sign of something going on in Port Chatham, or this problem, that there was a problem there. And things went on more or less normally for a few years. And then they opened up a mine not too far from Port Chatham, a chrome mine, mining chromite. During World War One, they used it. They ended up, I think, during the war, they processed about 100 tons or something like that came out of there, and that's hand sorted. That they didn't have the big machines like they do now. This is all like manual labor type stuff. And after the war, the price of chrome kind of plummeted, so they closed the mine down. But a lot of industry in the area. You had the fish, you had the timber, lots of virgin timber, and then you had the chrome and the coal. They have coal seams. I mean, you can drive through there in a boat today and see the chrome seam or the coal seams, on the beaches. It's pretty cool. So they got all these natural resources there. I mean, it's just amazing. And in 1950, the town was just abandoned. Like everybody, the postmaster was the last person left. They just all took off. And the rumor is, or the legend, as legend has it, is it was because of the Nantinaq, because it wouldn't leave the people alone. And there's a lot of mysterious deaths that occurred there. People would go into the woods to go hunting and turn up missing. There was a gentleman that had a logging operation there. He was found dead. He had been struck in the head with a large piece of equipment that they said a human couldn't lift. And then you had a prospector that was mining for gold in the area. He disappeared. And that was right around the same time as the guy with the logging operation. That was in 1931. And they were blaming it on the Nantinaq, on the Bigfoot. And then everything just kind of shut down and everybody left by 1950. And it's still abandoned today. And today it's actually owned, the English Bay Corporation owns it, which is it's a native company. So it's a native land now. And they don't really do anything with it. It just kind of sits there, and you got to get permission, obviously, from them to go there, which we did. Stephen got permission for them when we went and filmed the documentaries. But yeah, it's such an odd story because it doesn't fit the typical ghost town narrative. And when you think about ghost towns, they spring up around a resource like gold or, something like that, fish, whatever have you. And then the resource runs out and the town becomes a ghost town because everybody leaves because there's nothing there to keep them there anymore. Well, Port Chatham doesn't quite fit that narrative because the town was abandoned, everybody left, but the resources were still there.
So, what year did that happen?
1950 was when everybody left.
1950.
Yeah.
And what were people reporting? Like, were they being attacked in the town? People were seeing them do this?
Well, there's not a lot of firsthand accounts, and when I wrote the book, that's really what I wanted to get. I wanted to dig into it and find out like what happened, like where is, the firsthand accounts, where's the sightings, where's, who got killed, because that's what you hear the most is the deaths, oh my God, people went missing and people died. So I did a lot of digging into the records and the legends around the time. And I came up with the name of one of the victims, and his name was Andrew Camlock. He's the one that died in a logging operation. And I thought, well, now that I've got his name, I can do something with this. I've been a police investigator. A name is better than just, some guys went up there and they died. Well, that doesn't do anything for me. I got this guy's name, so I can do something with that. So I started digging into the state records. I wanted his death certificate is what I wanted, because I wanted something that would collaborate his manner of death. So I dug and dug and dug. Wasn't having a lot of luck. I called the state records office, which is in Juneau, and a nice lady was going to help me. And I told her what I was looking for and why I was looking for it. And she got all excited. She's like, "Oh, we're looking for somebody that was killed by Bigfoot. Cool." So she looked for me for a couple of days, and she came to me and she's like, "I can't find this dude's death certificate. Like, I don't know where." She actually told me, she's like, "Maybe you should check with the Homer police. Maybe they might." And I was like, "No, lady, I believe me, I work for the Homer police. We don't have it." Yeah, so we didn't come away completely empty-handed. We did find a death certificate for his son. So Andrew Camlock's son died at 14 years old, and he died, I can't remember. I think it was like 1941 or something. But his father was listed as Andrew Camlock, and Andrew Camlock's birthplace was listed as Portlock. So it put him in the right place at the right time, but it didn't collaborate the circumstances of his death. So it wasn't necessarily what I was looking for, but it was, it helped. I mean, it did help establish that he was there, he existed in that time frame. But I don't know why we can't find his birth certificate. I'm not a very conspiracy-minded person. I think it's probably more just most of this stuff happened before Alaska was a state. And the mandated record keeping that comes with that and all that. So I think that's a majority of the problem is it's not that the records were, secreted away. I just don't know that they ever existed. So that was one of the major problems I ran into with writing the book, is just a lack of good documentation.
Well, that's all very interesting stuff. I love hearing the research part of that. Often we don't get to hear those kinds of details. And with that, we're going to just go to our commercial break. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. Stay tuned, everyone. Good job. I'm looking at Tammy thinking, wow, she's been tanning.
I know. I'm looking at him like, wow, I'm so much darker than the rest of you. I live in Virginia Beach.
I went to a class one time in Ohio, and there's like 100 people in this class, and I'm sitting there. It was a class about investigating child fatalities, and this medical examiner was up there, and they were talking about pigmentation and like birthmarks and stuff like that, and how sometimes, like, what Mongolian marks are, or Mongolian spots. They can look almost like burns if you don't know what you're looking at. He was talking about pigmentation and stuff like that in skin. And she points at me and she goes, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Alaska." She's like, "You're the palest person in this room."
Yeah, you're all looking pretty pale.
All right. Mine's got to be the light, because I can't be that white. I just looked at my picture. I just looked at myself. I was like, no way. I'm that white.
Jenna's definitely darker than me because she's been going to the tanning salon. So
Twice. And it felt so good. But no UVF. Right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm so excited. This is such great stuff. Beans, you're awesome.
You're already halfway done.
I know.
All right, let's listen for Sarge. 30 seconds. Awesome. Oh, excuse me.
I don't know how I did it, but I just fixed the screen to have all 4 of us on. I can see my face now. I never was able to see my face.
You did large grid.
Oh, do you see it too?
Go.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hey, it's the Journey Radio Show, and we're the She-Squatchers. Won't you check us out online at She-Squatchers.com? And when you're there, click on our events page to see where we're going to be at this year. Next week, you can find us in Hastings, Nebraska at the Nebraska Bigfoot Conference. So if you can't make it there in person, they are selling Zoom tickets, so you can attend electronically.
So, Jen?
Yes.
Since I'm not going to be there, unfortunately, can I go to this on Zoom?
Yeah,
is it something you have to pay for? Is it free? How do we do it?
There are paid tickets on the website for that. On the Nebraska Bigfoot Museum.com, I think, is the website, but you can find that link on our website on the events page. So She-Squatchers.com, go to the events page and you can find information there. Also, hey, we're on YouTube, and we're in a YouTube race for subscribers with this other YouTuber who dared challenge us to a race. And so we're still in the running. So please come over to our YouTube channel at She-Squatchers Official and subscribe to our channel. Help us win. And we're also on Facebook and Instagram under She-Squatchers Official. So come on over and follow us there. That's where all the happenings of the latest are going to be at too. So back to our guest tonight, we've got Larry Beans Baxter. We're calling him Beans. And he's got some cool bean stories for us, that's for sure.
Oh, that's awesome.
So when we left off to the break, you were telling us about the research into the background of these people that went missing in this abandoned town.
Yes, and all the challenges and difficulties that entailed. And like I said, a lot of it happened before statehood, so it was very hard to track down any information about Port Chatham and the people that live there. There are still a few people that live there, kind of grew up there, that are around, but they're reaching advanced age. I was able to interview a gentleman that was born there. I actually had a couple of people on the list I wanted to talk to, and one of them actually passed away right before I could get to interview her, which I very sad, and I was very upset about that. I mean, one, she passed away, but two, I didn't get to document her story, and that that's the kind of stuff. If we don't document that and keep it going, it's going to die with them, and it's not going to get passed on. So I was very bummed about that. I heard she had an amazing life. She actually worked in the cannery, I think, with her mother and sisters, and they were making 15 cents an hour, from what I understand, which was good money back then. But I so sad I couldn't get to talk to her, because I imagine she had some great stories from that time. And I wasn't just interested in the Bigfoot stuff. I was interested in just how the town worked. I had a list of questions that I wanted to ask people that grew up there, and one of them was, were there cars in the town? Were there roads? How did people get around? They did have running water, and I knew that for myself, because when we were there doing our uh, documentaries, documentaries. When we were there filming, I actually saw some trees had fallen over and they had ripped some pipes up out of the ground. So I knew they had running water. Um, I did find out from the gentleman I interviewed that there was no electricity, but the cannery did have a generator. So the cannery had electricity, but nobody else did. So just all kinds of little things like that, like how the town functioned, how people got around. Most people just would hop in a boat and go over to Soldovia, or go, to Port Graham, or Nanwalek, and do their shopping, or they would take people over there to the doctor. The town didn't have a doctor. So it was just all kinds of neat little stuff like that I found out during the course of writing the book, and gathering history and information, and from people that had lived there and had been there. And then, of course, my own observations when I was over there. There's only a few structures that are still standing today. Uh, Most of them are pretty much, all the floors are rotted out. But if you get inside them, they'll keep the rain off of you. But that's about it. But it's kind of amazing if you think about it, because they survived the 1964 earthquake, which was one of the biggest earthquakes in the world. There are recorded earthquakes in the world, and they're still there. And then a lot of the machinery that was in the cannery is still there. It's kind of this. It's a really creepy experience. You're walking through this really thick brush, and you're moving tree branches and stuff out of the way, and all of a sudden you just come out in this clearing, and there's just all this old rusted machinery sitting there, and it's pretty creepy. But I've got some pictures of photographs of some of the machinery in my book. The book is called Abandoned: The History and Horror of Port Chatham. It's available on Amazon, and you can buy it at my website, alasquatchpodcast.com. And if you buy it from me, I'll sign a copy. But yeah, I did a lot of, probably it's the only nonfiction book available on Port Chatham, as far as I know. I know there's a couple of fictional stories that people have written about it. But as far as I know, it's the only nonfiction work about the history of Port Chatham.
They need to make a movie. Wouldn't that be a great movie?
Yes.
I know.
So no, you said this is where you were seeing these things. I mean, this is where you got your sightings, right? Like, this is.
Yep.
Oh, that's so neat.
So when you stayed there, you didn't stay in the town at night?
We didn't. We would. What we did is we took a little skiff on the shore. We would get out of the skiff. We would walk around, do our stuff, investigate, and we explore. And then at night we would go back to the boat and sleep on the boat.
Nobody said, "Hey, I'm going to stay in the town and see what happens."
I wanted to, but like I said, if we were going to, Adam wanted to too, but the problem was we didn't have enough people to really do like a 24-hour guard, kind of like we wanted to. Obviously, we weren't all going to go late, because I mean, not only have you got the creepy stories about the Bigfoot in the area, I mean, there are bears there, like real large bears that will eat you. People do get attacked by bears in Alaska quite a bit. In fact, a Coast Guard guy got mauled a couple of miles from my house here a couple of years ago. So, it's a very real danger that you have to be aware of. And so I wouldn't want to spend the night there without somebody, staying up and keeping watch, just because of the bears there are so wild and large. They're, pretty unpredictable.
So the buildings that are there, they're not something that you could have gone into and stayed in the night in?
No, I mean they've got walls and a roof, but that's about it. There's no doors, there's no windows. It's pretty open. I guess maybe you could stack enough stuff in front of the door that I mean any good sized bear could get in if it wanted to, I imagine. But yeah, there's not a lot of secure locations there that I would feel comfortable sleeping in, especially not with somebody keeping watch.
What about like a pickup or a van? Would you feel safe sleeping in something like that? Or are you saying,
They came in on a boat.
Yeah.
well, I mean, something's got to be there, isn't there? I mean, there's no
No.
structures you could
No, there's no
oh,
secure. Yeah, they're all pretty much like I said. It's just four walls and a roof, and then the door. There's no doors. There's no windows. They're just holes, in the structures. So, and there's no vehicles, nothing like that.
Yeah, because
and
that was
there's
from
not.
the 1950s. That was like 70 years ago. So
yeah. What an interesting story. Good for you for doing all of this background check. That's really neat. And I agree with Jen. We should make it. I'd love it. I'd watch it.
I have a question from the chat room. Sherry wants to know, are there any tales of Bigfoot from the era when Russia owned Alaska?
Obviously the natives were here before the Russians or the Americans, and I mean they have all the native Alaskan tribes have a Bigfoot, or some of them more than one Bigfoot. They have different types of Bigfoot, but all of them have some kind of upright bipedal walking hairy thing. And I can't think of any specific like Russian Alaskan Bigfoot stories, but the natives that were here before the Russians certainly had them.
Do you know any of the native stories that you could share?
Yeah, I know a few. Let's see, what would be a good one? I think one of my favorite ones is probably the tale. See, they have the natives. They believe that the Nantinaq, he's not just an animal. He's magical. He can shapeshift. He can change. And one of my favorite ones is the native hunter was out one day and he sees the Nantinaq. And he's going to shoot him. He decides, like, I'm tired of the Nantinaq bugging my people. I'm going to shoot it. So he shoots the Nantinaq, and it runs into this thick copse of trees. And he runs up to the trees, and he jams his gun in there, and he looks in, and he says the Nantinaq turns into a little mouse and runs away. And so that's one of my favorite ones, because just the huge man-like beast turns into a little mouse and then scurries away. It's not very exciting, but it's just so bizarre.
It is. I think that's neat. Do you know anything else? I mean, as far as Native American stories?
One of my favorite. So there's a lot going on in Port Chatham. It's not just Bigfoot. It's almost. I would almost compare it to a Skinwalker Ranch type situation.
Wow.
There's a lot of different things going on there. One of my favorite non-Bigfoot stories is a group of hunters that were out paddling along in their canoes. They call them bidarkas. They're paddling along in their bidarkas, and they see another group of hunters paddling along up in front of them a little bit. And they're like, "Well, who are these guys? They're not from this village or that village. Who are these hunters? So they start trying to catch up with them, and they realize that the other bidarka is trying to get. They're paddling faster. They're trying to get away from them, and they're like, well, why are they trying to get away from us? This is silly. Like, who are these people? So they're a group of young, strong hunters. So they start paddling faster, and they catch up with the other bidarka, and they pull up alongside of it, and the other people in the strangers in the bidarka, they won't look at them. They're averting their faces, and finally they're like, hey, come on, guys, we don't mean you any harm. We just want to say hi. Where are you from? We're hunters too. And so they finally, they look at them, and the strangers and the other bidarka, they all have one eye in the center of their forehead. And they start talking, and they say, well, we live in a hidden village nearby, and we don't interact with other natives because they treat us badly because of the way we look. And they talked for a little while, and they actually traded some meat with them before they parted ways. And the strangers went one way and the hunters went the other way, and they never saw them again.
So they only had one eye,
Yeah,
a cyclops.
yeah,
And they were regular human sized?
yeah. As far as the story is told, yeah.
That's exciting. I've never heard that one before.
I love this. We're hearing stories,
Yeah.
some good ones.
That's not something that you hear a lot about as Cyclops.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's, and then there's been UFO flaps in the area, strange lights that have been seen, even, I mean, as recently back in the 1980s. Yeah, it's just a bizarre area. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
Oh, I love this stuff. I love it. So, do you have more stories?
Wait, can I ask one question about what he was just talking about? Did when you were at I always want to call it Chernobyl, Port Chatham? I know, isn't that terrible?
Port Chernobyl.
Port Chernobyl. No, I was just wondering, did you happen to see any kind of oh, I'm trying to think of the word. Just any kind of symbols or anything that you recognized, or
Hieroglyphs, petroglyphs?
petroglyphs?
Yeah, like glyphs. I have seen them, but not. Well, here's the thing. Port Chatham is so thick and so overgrown. Like, I mean, it's just like an impenetrable wall. I could have walked underneath, around, on top of, and through, and I probably would have never known it. It's just so overgrown and so primordial that I very well could have walked through some glyphs or something and not known it. But I have seen, the most common one I've seen is the X's, the two big trees that are, and but I didn't. I mean, I saw some tree fall, that kind of look like that in Port Chatham, but nothing I would say like, oh, that's definitely a glyph or a mark or a marking. But it's just because there's just so much growth there and so many trees. It's almost impossible to say what should be there and what shouldn't be there.
Gotcha. That makes sense to me.
Oh shoot, we only have 15. It goes so fast.
It
I
does.
tell you.
Yeah. Well, I can't tell all the stories because I want people to buy the book.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want people to buy the book. So, was there recently a documentary that came out?
The one that we did in 2018, it came out in 2019. It's In Search of the Port Chatham Hairy Man. Then we did an episode of the Alaska Triangle for the Travel Channel. I think it's episode 2. And then we just recently had Bigfoot Encounters of the Pacific Northwest come out. But that's not about Port Chatham. We actually went to Stevens County, Washington, and filmed that one. If you're familiar with the Cripplefoot trackway, it's that area in there where those tracks were found.
Okay. And so where could we find that documentary?
That one is only on Vimeo right now. Amazon just recently changed some stuff around where they're not accepting unsolicited documentaries anymore, and you're going to see a big change in their content. I think they're not going to be carrying as many Bigfoot and paranormal documentaries as they have been. So I'm not really sure what the reasoning is behind that.
That's sad.
I'm sure because there's so many platforms now. There's just so many.
I think so, if some young entrepreneur out there was to start his own paranormal documentary channel, I think they could probably do pretty well.
I think they would too. There's got to be somebody who's already doing it. There has to be.
There is.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, I know that we have like 10 minutes left. If you had like a story to share or a most interesting experience that you wanted to share, will you please share that with us?
Yeah, let me tell you this one that happened to me in Washington. This is actually in the one I was just telling you about, the Bigfoot Encounters in the Pacific Northwest. We went there, Stephen and Amy Boo and Will Ulmer. Yeah, Amy's great. Will, he lives in Stevens County, and that's his research area. He runs Bigfoot of Stevens County Facebook page and group, and He's got some really good videos on YouTube. And we met up with him, and he took us to this area where he said there's a lot of activity. And I thought Alaska was a cool Bigfoot area. Like I'm like, okay, well, we'll go down here and I'll see what Washington's all about. And we're like unloading the truck at the campsite, and I'm hearing like screams and knocks in the woods. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So we were there. I can't remember if we were there for 3 or 4 days, but it was the last day, and or it was the last night, and we had walked up this old logging road because Will had said, "Man, I've never been up here, but it looks really squatchy. It was really overgrown, kind of creepy looking." So we walked up there. We walked like a couple of miles, and we saw every manner of track that you can think of: cougar, elk, bear, deer, just everything. And it was all kind of weird because all the tracks that we found, they were all headed in one direction, like down the mountain, like down the hill. And we were like, what are they trying to get away from? So we walked down that road a couple of miles. Didn't, other than the tracks, we didn't really see anything or hear anything squatchy. And we turned around and we're heading back. And it was all of us in the group. And it was the last day, and I was kind of getting disappointed because I was like, man, I want something to happen. I want to see something. I'm getting antsy in the pantsy. I want to see Bigfoot. And
you're so funny. I'm sorry, I say that too. Yeah. Antsy the pantsy. Ooh, ooh. Sorry, go on. Sorry.
So I tell the rest of the group, I'm like, you know what, guys, I'm gonna take a potty break. You guys go. You go ahead. I'll catch up with you. And of course, I'm not thinking like, oh, this is exactly how every missing 411 story goes. I'm thinking like, I want to see Bigfoot. So I kind of hang back from the group. They go ahead, and I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for them to get further ahead of me, and they get out of sight. And I wait a little bit longer, and then I pull out my FLIR, and I'm looking around, and I've got my back to the wood line on this side of the road. I'm FLIRing across the road on the other side of the road, and everything's going fine. And all of a sudden, I hear behind me. Sounds like it's pretty close. I hear like what sounds like whispering, just like 3 or 4 syllables, real quick. Can't make it out. Scares the heck out of me. I mean, just I'm wheeling around. I got the FLIR. I'm looking. Don't see anything. And get pretty freaked out by it. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go catch up with the other guys, without running. And so I'm like power walking down the little road there, yeah. And I'm trying to like rationalize this because, I try not to like think that every noise in the wood is Bigfoot or, I always, okay, what was that? It was pretty creepy. And I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe my water bottle, the lid wasn't tight and some air was escaping. I mean, I'm going through like everything, like what could it have been? And get back to the truck, meet up with them. I'm telling them about it. I'm like, oh my God, guys, I get my water bottle out and I'm like squeezing it. It's airtight. And I can't rationalize what it was. I don't know what it could have been. And so we get in the truck, we go back to the campsite, and that's our last night there. And I was just, I can't even describe it. I just, I like I told you guys, I was a police officer for 15 years. I've been in a lot of different situations. I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you, giving you a frame of reference for this. I've been in the military. I've been a police officer. I've been through some stuff. And I was scared out of my mind. It was like an unnatural fear that pretty much lasted for the entire night. And I'm sitting around the campfire. I think Will I don't know if he was picking it up off of me or he was picking it up off the vibe, but he kind of felt like something was up too. And me and Will sat around. Everybody else was normal. I mean, I think Amy left. She had to go catch a plane, so she went ahead and left. Steven was still there. But I mean, to Steven, it was just like a normal night. All right, I'm going to bed, guys. Good night. And me and Will sat around the campfire with our guns out, basically like waiting for the Sasquatch Nation to come over the hill and like get us. And we sat there till I think it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we heard this big boom, this big like power knock, sounded like a tree knock / gunshot. And all of a sudden, Will looks up at me and he goes, is it just me or did the atmosphere change? And I said, no, dude, you're absolutely right. Like, I'm not scared anymore. And it was just like somebody flipped a switch and that feeling went away. It was so bizarre. I cannot explain it. And I don't get a whole lot into the paranormal or the woo side of things. I don't know. I don't know what that could have been other than, maybe some kind of my reaction to what had happened to me earlier, or if I was hit with some kind of infrasound or what. I don't know what that was. But there for a long time, I was kind of scared to go back to that area. But we're going back. I'm going to the Medellin Falls Bigfoot Festival in June, and I've made my mind up. I'm going to go back to that campsite and spend a couple of nights there when I go back. I've got to face my fear, but that's probably the creepiest / strangest thing that's ever happened to me.
Oh, that's really
Wow.
cool. I've had the feeling of getting scared like that all of a sudden, and I was like, Jenna, it's time to go.
She has too. It's like, Jenna, let's go.
Yeah.
Now.
If somebody had suggested like, oh, let's just go ahead and pack up early and go into town and get a hotel or something, I'd have, like, my stuff, I wouldn't even have took my tent down. I'd have just thrown it in a truck and been like, all right, let's go.
I'm always down for a hotel.
Yes, she is. She's not lying. She loves those whirlpools and swimming pools,
In the shower.
caviar. Yes, in the
I like all
showers.
that too, but I like to go camping first.
There you go. Actually, yeah, that is a great time. Going camping and then coming back and babying yourself.
That's what my plan is. I'm going to go out after the festival and camp for about a week, and then before I go back on and get on a plane, I'm going to go get a hotel and freshen up before I go sit next to some people on a plane.
You are so kind. There are so many people that don't do that.
Yeah.
That's somebody's going to be saying thank you.
They won't know what they missed. For sure. Well, we just have a few minutes left of the show. I want to make sure that you let everybody know how to find you and the projects that you've worked on, your book, the documentary that just came out. I'm just going to remind Jenna, because it was weeks ago, you and I both watched that documentary.
I was going to say, is that the one we watched? But I didn't want to be rude and interrupt. So yes, it was a great documentary.
Yes. So the one thing that I really enjoyed about it also was a lot of the explanations about the tracking and the footprints. And, I really, really appreciated that. And I know Jenna was saying that too.
Yeah, it was really that was a really interesting area, and we've kept finding those same 13-inch size tracks everywhere. And I was, who in the world would be walking around out here barefoot? It's just bizarre.
With that big of feet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it was bizarre. And then Will, he's a really good tracker. He was able to show us like, okay, well, see, here's a track, and then you can look and see, okay, well, there's the other step, and then I mean we I don't know exactly how far it was, probably 300 or 400 yards. I think we tracked that one to where we found that track that looked good enough for us to cast. But we started at that little pool of water there, and followed those footprints up to where we found that castable track.
Wow, that's awesome. How many tracks did you actually get?
We just cast the one.
Oh, okay.
But we could see, and that was really the only one that was worth casting. But you could definitely see, like, okay, we followed the trackway, the trails, the disturbances in the woods and the leaf litter and stuff like that to that area. And it was bizarre because if it was a barefoot person, they were walking, into deeper woods. They weren't walking towards the campground. It was so bizarre. Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Well, that's the end of the show. I want to thank Beans for joining us tonight. And, he's got a podcast at alasquatchpodcast.com. So check that out. And the new documentary is on Vimeo on demand. It's Stevens County Bigfoot. Is that right?
Bigfoot Encounters in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was looking at the link.
Yeah. I think that was the
All right.
working title. Yeah.
I will put the link also in the description on YouTube as well. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thanks for coming on the show tonight. We really appreciate being here.
Thanks for having me. I had a blast.
Yes. Hope to meet you in person sometime.
I'm sure we will.
And there will be no live show next week because I'll be in the air flying to Nebraska. So we'll see you in a couple weeks, everyone. Take care and make sure you tune into that Nebraska Bigfoot conference on the Zoom if you can't make it in person.
I'm going to be there.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Night.
everybody.
Good night.